Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Cuyahoga County Human Resources Appointment and Equity Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, September 19th. Council Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. There is a quorum.
Thank you so much. Is there any public comment related to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair, no one is signed in.
All right. I hope that we have had a chance to review the minutes from our August 1st, 2017 meeting. May I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. If there are no questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. We will now move to matters referred to the committee. Council Clerk, if you'll read the first item.
Resolution number 2017-0151, adopting various changes to the Cuyahoga County non-bargaining classification plan.
Good morning.
Good morning. Albert Bouchahine with the Personnel Review Commission. Madam Chair, the Personnel Review Commission is requesting your consideration for modifications to the county's non-bargaining classification plan, changes in departments' operational needs, and routine maintenance necessitate the revision of 7 classifications and the creation of 11 new classifications. You were provided a packet of information that includes a summary of the information such as the rationale for the changes, who they were requested by, and the number of employees that are affected. These changes were prepared by the PRC Class and Comp staff, who has worked extensively with the Department of Human Resources and county management to ensure they're fully informed of these changes that are presented before you. In accordance with the PRC rules, the proposed changes were posted on the PRC's website for 20 days prior to PRC action. The PRC considered and approved recommending these changes to you at their August 23, 2017 meeting. Madam Chair, due to the length of the process and urgency to fill some of these positions, we're requesting that these recommendations be approved under second reading suspension of rules. I appreciate your and thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bouchane. Are there any questions from the committee with regards to the changes? Mr. Miller.
Madam Chair, Mr. Bouchahine, there are 3 positions on the revisions that are increasing 1 in pay grade level. And my question is, how many incumbents are there that are affected by these changes, and do we have some idea of what the fiscal impact might be?
Madam Chair, to Councilman Miller, I'm assuming you're referring to the Class and Comp specialist at the PRC. There are 2 Class and Comp specialists in those classifications. The employment testing specialist went up a pay grade. There are 6 employment testing specialists, and there is the Senior Information Systems Administrator went from Schedule 16A to Schedule 16B. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I will email those to you as soon as I get back with regard to the fiscal impact of those positions, Councilman. The other classifications that went up in pay grade were new classifications as a result of the Program Officer Classification Series. The Early Child Care Program Specialist had 1 employee incumbent. That employee makes approximately $46,000. The new classification, the pay grade for that classification range is between 40 and 57. So they fall within that range. Any increase will be based on a decision that's going to be made in the future by the Department of Human Resources. There's also 1 more classification at the Family and Children First Council. That's the Family and Children First Council Service Coordinator. That classification is a vacant position that was formerly a program officer 4. There's no incumbents in that classification. Once and if this is approved, that position will be posted. And lastly, the Senior Emergency Management Specialist classification has 2 incumbents in the classification, and they too fall within the range of the new pay grade. So there's no fiscal impact, if any, that will be made in the future, that determination by the Department of Human Resources.
And Madam Chair, Mr. Bouchahine, in the proposed new classifications, do any of these positions have responsibilities that that overlap with currently existing positions, either classified or unclassified?
Madam Chair, to Councilman Miller, these new classifications, there are no essential functions that we have been able to identify that overlap.
And Madam Chair, Mr. Bushneen, for the new classifications, is there identified need for these positions and plans to fill them, or is this more speculative in nature at this point?
It is our understanding that all of these classifications are intended to be filled. 8 of the 11 new classifications were at the request of agency directors. They intend to fill these positions once these classifications are approved by council. 3 of the new classifications are a result of us auditing and creating new classifications for people that were assigned program officers. We're trying to get them classifications that are more aligned with their duties and essential functions. But it's our understanding that 8 of the 11 that are requested by department directors will be posted and filled once these are approved.
Madam Chair, Mr. Bushneen, has Budget and Management looked at these 8 additions and approved them based on the fiscal impact?
Madam Chair, to Councilman Miller, that's a better question for the Department of HR, but with respect to my understanding of how the process works, that the Department of Human Resources generates a hiring request that has the Office of Budget Management sign off and approval prior to posting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. With regards, I just want to follow up on Councilman Miller's questions with regards to the new positions. We had a meeting yesterday about the ERP, and I see there are 4 new positions created behind the ERP system. Do you know how many people will be hired for each of those respective positions? That's M, N, O, and P.
Madam Chair, my understanding that there will be 1 incumbent for each of these 4 classifications.
Okay, and the pay grade of 16B, can you give us the range for that?
I can. Madam Chair, the pay grade 16B, step 1 is $75,108.80 to step 17, which is $105,144.
And we're looking at potentially 4 people?
That is my understanding, but that may be a better question suited to the Department of Human Resources, but my understanding is there will be 1 lead for each classification.
Is that true of all the new classifications, or will there be additional hires, any others?
Madam Chair, are
More
you
than
speaking
one.
specifically to the ERP or all the new ones we're creating?
All of the new ones. So H, there's a data analyst, early child care program specialist, employment testing proctor.
I am not aware of the number of employees they intend to hire in the data analyst classification. With respect to the proctors that the PRC intends to hire, that came about as a alternative to using a higher level administrative and testing employees who earn upward of $60,000. We didn't think that was a good use of their time. We thought it would be best if we created a lower level classification that just strictly proctored tests, so they can spend their time on doing job analysis and test development. We had intended to hire part-time testing proctors, kind of intermittent employees based on our scheduling needs. These individuals would not be full-time.
Okay.
They would be multiple employees that would be called as needed.
All right, that's helpful. Okay, are there any additional questions from the committee? If there are none, may I have a motion to move this to the full body of the council under second reading suspension?
I so move.
Is there a second? It's been moved in second. If there are no further questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, this will move to the full body of council under second reading suspension.
Thank you.
Council Clerk, will you please read the next item into the record?
Resolution number 2017-0154, confirming the county executive's appointment of Michael Foley to serve on the Cuyahoga County Natural Resources Assistance Council for the term 10/16/2017 through 10/15/2020.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kraus, will you please give us a little bit of background?
Sure. The District 1 Public Works Integrating Committee called DOPWIC is responsible for appointing persons to the NRAC, which is the Natural Resources Assistance Council, which is the body that evaluates, selects open space, riparian corridor protection, and/or preservation projects for funding from the Clean Ohio Green Space Conservation Program. Cuyahoga County has one appointment to the NRAC by the County Council pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 164.21A, and the NRAC also administers the Clean Ohio Conservation Program in Cuyahoga County. You have Mr. Foley's resume. I don't think there's a better person, probably in the whole county, that would be with better credentials, background, experience than Mike Foley. So pleased to, on behalf of the executive, nominate Mike to this position.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. I understand he will be replacing Chanel. Is it because Chanel is no longer with us or is it because the term is expiring? I'm not exactly clear. Is she still serving?
No, it's both.
Okay, both.
So she would have come before you for reappointment.
Okay.
If she were still here, but she has to, the representative has to be working for Cuyahoga County.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Foley, I'm going to turn it over to you if you will share with us a little bit of your background. And I would encourage you that we are very familiar with you and because we have a lot of people on our agenda with respect and regard to their time. If you will be brief, and then if the council or the committee has questions, then we'll proceed in that fashion. So.
Thanks, Councilwoman. I'll be brief.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Foley, Director of Sustainability. I've worked on environmental and kind of green issues for a long time as a legislator and as the Director of Sustainability. I think I'm pretty fit to do the job and represent the county well, hopefully. So request your support.
Thank you so much. Are there questions with regards to Mr. Foley's appointment?
Yes.
Councilman Miller?
My question is only whether there's any reason why passage is needed under second reading suspension.
Is there a meeting coming up soon
Yes,
in the
sir.
near future?
No, this could go through. The applications will be coming in October 20th and then forwarded to the Natural Resources Assistance Council for evaluations. So,
Okay,
yes.
so we respectfully request that we would give this the full 3 readings if you are comfortable with that, since there is no need to pass it under second reading suspension?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Are there any further questions, comments, or concerns? All right, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to refer Resolution 2017-0154 to the full council for second reading.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Are there any additional questions, comments, or concerns? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, this will move to the full body of the council for second reading. Item C, Council Clerk, will you please read that into the record?
Resolution number 2017-0155, confirming the county executive's appointment or reappointment of various individuals to serve on the City of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Board for various terms.
Thank you so much, and I believe we have a proposed substitute as it relates to that on page 69. And the proposed substitute corrects the term for Ms. Sheila Wright, and it also omits David Feinerman. Is that correct, Council Clerk?
Yes, Madam Clerk.
All right, so if we can, is there a motion to work from the proposed substitute?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. If there are no questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We'll be working from the proposed substitute. Mr. Kraus, if you give us a little background.
Sure. The City of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Board, which was formerly known as Workforce Investment Board, was established to fulfill the functions outlined in the Federal Workforce Investment Act of 1998. and was created pursuant to the provisions of Revised Code Chapter 6301. This WDB is authorized by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014. It serves as an advisory body for the Cuyahoga County Department of Workforce Development. By law, this body provides policy and guidance and exercises oversight for the service delivery area number 3, which includes the City of Cleveland and all of Cuyahoga County. And it's a partnership between Cuyahoga County and the City of Cleveland. It's my understanding that there's approximately 30 or so people on the WDB, and there's a mixture of appointments between the City of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. So these are the appointments from Cuyahoga County. These are various individuals for the unexpired term. And if you want me to go into the individuals, I certainly can.
We'll let them give their
Okay,
background.
sure.
Thank you so much. Ms. Wright, looks like you're
Madam
first.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
One question to Mr. Kraus. Does the WDB actually receive and manage any workforce funds, or is their role limited to being a policy advisory body?
It's my understanding it's an advisory body solely.
Okay, fine.
Thank you so much. All right, if you'll give us a little bit of your background and why it is that you would like to serve on this board.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Council. Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me. I have worked in the past few years extensively around workforce. I've served in an advisory capacity with the State Workforce Board. I currently sit on the Healthier Buckeye Advisory Council, which helped to roll out the comprehensive case management program involving workforce. And I work very closely with some of the members on the State Workforce Board. I've served in an advisory capacity to the county leadership with respect to programs that they're going to roll out around workforce. So I've been immersed in it for the past few years, and was quite honestly honored when the county executive asked me to serve in this capacity.
Excellent. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns from the committee? Mr. Miller?
Yes. Ms. Wright, thanks very much for all your involvement in this very important
Thank you.
area. And am I correct? You have not served on this particular board previously, so you would be coming in new to serve an unexpired term. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Fine.
Any additional questions, comments, or concerns? No? Well, Ms. Wright, I want to first and foremost thank you for your willingness to serve, and especially your willingness to come down and present your desire to serve on this board before this body. We genuinely and sincerely appreciate it. It is extremely important to us that we know who it is that who we are appointing to the boards, and the spirit and capacity in which they're willing to serve. And the precedents that Councilwoman Conwell set by asking that the appointees and reappointments be before us is one that I greatly appreciate as I sit in this chair seat. So having worked with you as well in other capacities, I would encourage my colleagues to support your recommendation along with our County Executive Budish. And so if there are no additional questions or comments, I will make the motion to move this to the full body of the council. Mr. Kraus, do we need second reading? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll do that after we read through the remainder of the names. But yes, Mr. Miller.
That was my same question.
Okay. I'll have to do it after we read through the remainder of the names. If you would like to stay to see how the vote will proceed, you are welcome to do so. But I thank you again for your willingness to come down and share with us your desire to serve in that capacity. And I don't anticipate that there are any objections to your appointment moving forward. So we will move on to our next candidate, who is Grace Galucci. And I received word from our council clerk that she had a meeting with NOACA today and was unable to attend the meeting. So we will excuse her absence. And in lieu of the appointments or reappointments absence, we request that they submit a letter before the council and before this committee before we move on their final appointment in the council meeting. So we anticipate receiving that before the week's end. Again, item C was omitted by the substitute. Item D, Mr. Matthews, if you're unfamiliar with Dr. C.J. Matthews, he is a pastor and had to attend funeral services this morning, so his absence will always also be excused, and he will be submitting a letter with regards to his desire to serve in this capacity. So our next item is B, Kim Shelnick. Did I say that right? Yes, you did. Okay, Ms. Shelnick, if you'll step forward, and in the same fashion, let us know a little bit about your background and why it is that you would like to serve on this board.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for your time and consideration. I'm Kim Shelnick, and I work for University Hospitals for over 10 years. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources, and currently I focus on recruitment, talent development, and workforce development and planning. I've been on the board previously, and I'm extremely involved today in the Strategic Function Committee and also very involved in workforce development for the entire county and multiple initiatives and focusing on youth and also underprivileged in the poorest neighborhoods in the county and city, and have worked with the board and others to create very innovative initiatives to employ many within the county. And I'm very passionate as an employer on this subject, and it's a sincere passion of mine to be on the board.
Thank you so much. So can you just tell me a little bit about the term, you served 3 years prior?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And you indicated some of the communities in which you've worked in. Can you identify some of the programs that you've done in the city of Cleveland?
Absolutely. So surrounding Cleveland Medical Center is the University Circle neighborhoods. And so I've worked very closely with Towards Employment, Neighborhood Connections, also YOU to come up with a program, for example, called Step Up to UH, where we've gone into the neighborhoods and been able to provide soft skills training, also provide job coaches to ensure those individuals are successful in the roles, and created programs where we call them selection funnels before the funnel, where we pick them and ensure that we stay with those individuals and then move them up through with career pathways within our organization. So University Hospitals and myself are very dedicated to figuring out not just employing individuals, but moving them up within the organization.
So how do you market or perform the community outreaches so that the people in the community are aware of the program?
What we do is we partner with Neighborhood Connections, and they have information sessions within the neighborhoods to ensure individuals from the churches and individuals just within the neighborhoods coming to these information sessions know about the programs. To date, we have put over 400 residents into the programs within University Hospitals. And again, I think I mentioned I'm on the Strategic Functions Committee for the board today, and very involved with creating other programs as it relates to workforce. And right now, working directly with David Feinerman and Merriman in the county to focus on how we're now going to get into the high schools to ensure individuals are developed to go into nursing assistant positions. Because of the shortage within healthcare, we're going to have over 300 openings a year, so we're being very creative in how we train and develop those individuals.
Excellent. And then the only other question I would have is how, if at all, do you approach the reentry community, and does UH have a policy as it relates to that?
We do, and we take it very seriously, and I think everyone here knows that there are very specific Senate bills that dictate within healthcare that you can't hire certain individuals with particular convictions. But as I oversee talent acquisition, every single individual that has a conviction conviction, we carefully adjudicate and assess that individual and keep it very confidential. And we do hire many individuals that have convictions that don't fall outside of that mandate. But again, we're carefully assessing it, and we're also looking at their behaviors and competencies and what development we can provide.
Okay, are there any additional questions, comments, or concerns from the committee? I'm going to start to my left, Mr. Miller, Councilwoman Conwell.
Through the chair to Michelle Neck, wondering if you have any assistance, University Hospital has any assistance with math skills, helping the young students?
Absolutely.
Because that's the main.
It is. It's a significant problem, and as it relates to both math and literacy, I have created a program that's called Bridge to Your Future. And what we do is we partner with Tri-C, and we are giving our youth and our employees appropriate developmental skills by, again, partnering with Tri-C to ensure they're ready to get into college. Most positions in healthcare, 60%, do require some type of certificate or degree, so we want to ensure we can move them up. So that's why we created that program to help with that particular issue that we take very seriously.
Mr. Miller?
Madam Chair, Michelle Nick, first, thank you very much for your willingness to bring your expertise from UH into the county-wide workforce program. It's greatly appreciated. And my question is, I'd be interested in your perspective on how long the career pathway approach to workforce development has been around and how it developed.
How long has it been around, career pathways? I have been involved in workforce development at UH for 10 years, and then previously I worked for Progressive Insurance and KeyBank in talent acquisition. And I think in the 30 years, it's always been around. But the problems have always been strong commitment from employers related to the collaboration with workforce agencies, the county, the city, et cetera. Because you have to have that synergy and that collaboration so that you can figure out the challenges to move people up. As mentioned, math and reading and ensuring that individuals receive the right wraparound services so they have the potentials to move up. So to answer your question, it's always been around to move individuals in career pathways, but it's really up to the employers partnering to ensure qualifications are appropriate to be able to help individuals move up.
So what you're saying is it's not the idea itself, but it's more that the collaboration has gotten better in the last 2 years?
Absolutely, and that's what we have to push, and it has to be employer-driven. And on the Strategic Functions Committee that I'm a part of within the board, I'm constantly pushing the importance of employers being on that board and listening to really what the employers need so that we can collaborate and solve some of the problems within the county.
When I look at what the administration is doing with their career pathway workforce programs, it seems like an excellent and very forward-looking concept. But the number of people that can be served seems relatively small. My question is how do we take this to scale? Because there's obviously thousands of people that could benefit from this kind of thing.
There's many ways to take it to scale. From my perspective, you need the employer's involvement to do what I mentioned earlier, is to figure out how you create those, what I call selection funnels before the regular selection funnel. When you're dealing with large organizations like University Hospitals, Cleveland Clinic, you receive thousands of responses every single month for jobs, and you're also governed by other regulations such as affirmative action, and everything has to be fair, and you post a job, and the individual has to meet the minimum qualifications, you have to look at the best resume before you move someone up. So you have to be more creative to bring it to scale, where you have to think of collaborative ways to ensure individuals are job ready to get into that funnel so that you can create that fair process. So the more that you're out there and creating those programs, the wraparound services, and then the commitment from the employers to help them navigate in that system and then move up in the system, you start to see more and more success in those programs.
And Madam Chair, Ms. Shelnick, are there open positions that could be filled if we have people qualified for them, as opposed to we're just going to be taking one group of people and moving them ahead of another group of people, but there aren't any more jobs. I'm asking whether, if we improve the workforce, if there's extra jobs out there that people can get.
The issue is you have to look at the supply and demand. So, for example, University Hospitals just spent a lot of time on a strategic plan related to where are the actual needs and where are the needs going out 10 years, and marrying that up with what programs are in the colleges. So factually, we know that there is a shortage for nurses, and alone within this county, there's going to be a shortage of 3,000 RNs in the next couple of years. And so how do we address that? So we have to ensure that we're working with the schools and partnering up so that they recognize in the future that there is a significant need in healthcare, or what other fields are there needs, so that we're building the talent to be able to match where the needs are at. And that's what's key. So I've actually been to a lot of meetings at the state level from the board perspective, and that's what it's about. We're hearing that there's a mismatch in what people are going into compared to where the jobs are, and ensuring that we're communicating that, marketing that, and getting into the schools appropriately so that there will be the jobs in the future. Although there will be the talent for the exact jobs that are going to be out there in the future.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Jones.
what is the typical pay scale for a registered nurse?
I would say about $55,000 a year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Shelnick. If there are no further questions. All right. Mr. Cross, does this need to move to under second reading suspension?
I'm not aware that there is with any upcoming meetings.
Okay, that is favorable for those who are not able to attend. Thank you very much,
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Shelnick. Clearly, you bring a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I think will be a tremendous asset to, continue to be a tremendous asset to the board. So thank you for your willingness to serve. I would like to remind the committee, and just for the record, that those who are not in attendance, we do have their resumes and letters with a description of their background and willingness to serve. So without further ado, I'm going to make the motion to move this to the full body of the council. And may I please have a second?
Second.
All right, this will move to the full. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, this will move to the full body of the council. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. We are going to move to item D. Council Clerk, if you'll please read it into the record.
Resolution number 2017-0156, confirming the county executive's appointment or reappointment of various individuals to serve on the Cuyahoga County Community-Based Correctional Facility Governing Board for various terms.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Cross, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Ohio Revised Code 2301.51 has established, Cuyahoga County established a community-based correction facility provides local alternatives to prison sentences for nonviolent offenders who have the potential to be rehabilitated through local punishment, work, and education. The community-based correctional facilities provide comprehensive programming to address the needs of offenders, which includes chemical dependency issues, lack of education, training for current employment opportunities. These efforts are designed to achieve the goal of reducing recidivism and providing successful reentry into society.
Thank you so much. And my apologies, gentlemen, I'm sorry.
My name?
Yes.
Alfonso Sanchez.
Okay, Mr. Sanchez, I appreciate your willingness to step up. I respectfully ask if we can go in the order unless you have somewhere that you need to be.
No.
Okay, all right. I'm going to respectfully request that we follow the order of the agenda. The first appointment that I have coming before us is Ms. Valeria A. Harper. Okay, thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I ask a question of Mr. Kraus? Sure. Mr. Kraus, can you share with the committee who are these individuals, the new appointments, who they're replacing?
Let's see if I have this in here. Ms. Harper is replacing Mr. Denahan.
Okay, I figured that.
And just to add, there are 12 members of the CBCF, and they're appointed by the county and the Cuyahoga County Judicial Advisory Board.
And Ms. Crystal Bryant, who is she replacing?
Let me just check.
They had it in. Okay. They had it in the legislation.
I
Mr.
think it's
Kraus.
going to be Mr.
Mr.
Vincent
Holland.
Holland.
Mr. Vince Holland? Yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Miller?
To Mr. Kraus, about how many people are housed at the correctional facility?
I don't have the specifics, but I'll try to get that to you.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee for Mr. Kraus? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Harper. If you will share with us your background and your willingness to serve on this committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and other members of the committee. Again, my name is Valeria Harper, and I am on my 50th day as the Chief Executive Officer of the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board. I have over 35 years of experience in behavioral health, which is inclusive of treatment for persons living life with mental illness and those who are addicted and or have a substance use disorder. Of those 35 years, I'm dawning upon 30 years in the former Mental Health Board and now with the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board. To your question directly related to the community-based correctional facility, I have been involved in the programming aspect since its inception in Cuyahoga County. Being to the left side of the former chief, for which I will passionately always call him chief, I was instrumental in developing the programs as it relates to those nonviolent offenders sentenced to the CBCF with chronic and severe mental illness, as well as those with substance use disorders. In the programming aspect of it, we help to work with two of our contract agencies to be actually housed within the CBCF. I feel as if my wealth of experience and my continued need to learn as the sentencing of individuals with either mental illness and addiction, especially in the wake of this horrific opioid and heroin crisis that we're faced with, I feel that I have the qualifications to be a very active and very hands-on member of the Corrections Governing Board, if so desired by the vote of County Council. So I appreciate the nomination and your consideration this morning.
Thank you very much. Chief Harper?
No, just Valeria.
Valeria. Well, congratulations on your 50th day. Clearly, you are well deserving, and I think everyone on this committee would agree your reputation precedes you, and you will be a welcome member of the CBCF. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues and ask if there are any questions, comments, or concerns with regards to Ms. Harper's appointment. There being none, again, your reputation precedes you. I think that speaks volumes. We are going to move on to our next candidate, and I thank you for your willingness to serve and the wealth of knowledge and experience that you bring. And again, taking the time out to come before this body is really greatly appreciated. And so, thank you very much.
And thank you for your consideration. Have a good day.
More than welcome. Our next candidate is Ms. Crystal Bryant. Will you please step forward? And if you'll proceed in the same fashion and give us a little bit of your background and why you're willing to serve on the CBCF.
Sure. So as you already stated, good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, council members. My name is Crystal Bryant. I currently act as the director of the Cuyahoga County Office of Reentry. I have 16 years of public service in various government agencies. My wealth of experience in terms of law, behavioral health, social service, public benefits, and reentry uniquely qualify me to be in this position serving in an advisory capacity. I uniquely understand the client needs from my years of direct service in drug court, as well as uniquely understanding the system needs from my various years of working in administration and understanding the value that a CBCF brings to our community. We are lucky to host one. I have been in the planning phases of the CBCF as a grad student at Tiffin when Ken Kochevar was my professor of policy, and he would ask us before the CBCF had even came to fruition the best ways of explaining that we need that here in Cuyahoga County and what you can uniquely do with a CBCF here in Cuyahoga County. Obviously, as the director of the Office of Reentry, I have a vested interest in pre-entry and reentry services, and I am accountable for public dollars and how we utilize them to best service and ensure that we have reentrants in the community make a successful reentry. So I believe that I would be a great candidate. I am honored for the nomination, and I hope that you all will appoint me to the board.
Thank you very much. If I might add a few of my own comments, I've had the distinct privilege of working with Ms. Bryant on some faith-based reentry programming that we still have yet to complete, but I can definitely say with a great deal of confidence the knowledge and skills and experience that she would offer this board would be a tremendous asset. So I am going to turn it over to my colleagues and ask if there are any questions. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, congratulations, Crystal.
Thank you.
I enjoyed the time we worked together, and the energy you bring along with your experience and intellect have really been a pleasure to see and to work with you. My one question is, does this governing board oversee more than just the one correctional facility, which I believe is housed in District 8, my district as well, right next to the main post office? Am I correct in that?
So the Oriana House happens to be the vendor for multiple county contracts that are associated with reentry and corrections. I believe they're the vendor currently for the existing CBCF. They have separate halfway house contracts, in which I don't know who their funding source is. And then the Office of Reentry funds the Oriana House as a vendor for North Star, which is the Community Resource Center for Reentrants on East 55th. Was that the question?
So this governing board that you're being appointed to oversees Oriana House as well?
No.
No, okay. Just the correctional facility?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the only correctional facility in Cuyahoga County?
This is the only community-based correctional facility in Cuyahoga County. Okay. I believe it took upwards of 10 years to plan and advocate to have that here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Miller?
Yes. Could you say a little bit about how community-based correctional facilities are different from other correctional facilities?
Sure. I think the biggest difference with a community-based correctional facility is that the inmate has the ability to leave the institution during the day to receive services, which we would constitute as pre-entry services, before serving their full sentence and being released out into the community. So it's a cost savings because we're not trying to figure out how to provide pre-entry services for the individual, as we're already providing some supports to the community, and they can leave throughout the day to exercise their rights in receiving these services on a voluntary basis. Or on a conditional basis based off their judge's sentence that allows them or ensures that they receive workforce training, behavioral health services, any type of public benefits enrollment if they're allowed to do so at that time, and be be answering to and be responsive to the needs of probation or parole should they have been sentenced, and they are answering to those institutions at this time.
And do you have a sense for how many people are housed at the correctional facility at any one time?
I do not know how many individuals are housed at the CBCF at one time. I apologize. I do not know their capacity. I do know that they are underutilized, and I only know that from different meetings that I am privileged to be a part of. So they are underutilized, and they're not at their max capacity at this moment.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Kraus can speak to that.
I did get a text that there are 200 beds.
200.
And currently, almost full with the 200 beds.
All right, thank you.
You said they are full?
Almost full with
Almost
the 200
full.
beds, yes.
Okay.
Which I would imagine a great service like that should have a waiting list instead of, again, being underutilized, because it is a service that many of the people in the community could definitely use. So, any further questions from the committee?
I was going to comment on just what you said about underutilized. And correct me if I'm wrong. The principle is that you keep someone close to their family, here to their network and their resource, their family resources when they use this facility. And there are many who are in other facilities that could be here closer by underutilized. That's the concept of bringing those from this community back to this community to serve their time.
That is absolutely correct, Councilman Jones.
All right, if there are no further questions, comments, or concerns, then I'm going to ask for our next candidate to step forward. Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Mr. Sanchez, you're up now. Thank you for your patience. And looks like you're going to be reappointed, so you've served on this board for some time. So if you will tell us a little bit about your background and why it is that you would like to continue to serve.
Well, ironically, my background is mostly bricks and mortar. I have been in the construction business for over 50 years. So I was asked to build this facility, the Nancy McDonald building. And we did build it, and we had it designed and put in place, and been operating since 2011. This will be my 6th year as acting chairman. When I first started, my passion was for Indeed Construction. But as I got into the development of the programs and the spaces, how they were going to be used, I was really, really interested in that. But then after I got on board and I was actually physically involved in what was going on in the institution, I developed a passion for how difficult it is to get everybody on the same page with regard to the judges, the clients, the families, just everybody, so that they're all going in the same direction. And that's become my more recent passion, and that's why I really would love to continue serving, because I think we're doing some good work.
Excellent. As a person that that started out in construction, I'm not real sure. I understand a little bit from what Ms. Bryant shared, but do you have any relationships with the construction industry or the building trades? Is there some type of partnership to help the reentry population go into that field?
No, not as yet, not in that facility, but I have other opportunities where that's being done quite readily, especially as it relates to the Latino community. I've been asked to try to find craftsmen and subcontractors that could get involved in county jobs to increase their participation.
Absolutely. So is that something that we can look forward to, or are there some obstacles in your way that are preventing that from happening?
No obstacles really. Unless we build another institution or another building, we won't have an opportunity to do that kind of hiring. But when that opportunity presents itself, we surely will jump on it.
Thank you. If there are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Mr. Jones?
And just a follow-up to the council, to the chairwoman's question. It's unique. Your background experience is unique, but you are the chair of the board. Is that correct?
Yes.
The chair. I guess my question really is the same. Help us understand your passion. How did you go from construction to the chair of a correctional board. Help us to understand just.
Well, my usual role is to build a building and then move on, okay? What this has been a totally different experience. And as I was placed on the board after it was built and operational, I learned so many things about the services that could be applied and could be applied more efficiently. And getting the judges, the prohibition department, the operator of the building, and our board, getting all that integrated to go into one direction has been a real pleasure for me. It's sort of the kind of thing I like to do, and I hopefully others will think I'm doing it fairly well. But to get all that organized has been quite an experience. But to see what good work is being done because of it has really turned me on lately. It's been really my real passion.
Any personal stories in your experience that just come to mind for you that?
Well, we have a graduation ceremony once people have gone. This is an all-male institution. I guess you knew that.
I've actually toured it, yes.
Yeah, so that when we have the graduation and the families are there and those that have completed the program are happy, and again, sort of a realization, we're beginning to note that they're asking for some transformational service to keep doing what they have been doing in our institution. So it's kind of interesting that we're now focusing on that piece of transitional services that we really haven't gotten into as deeply as we should have in the past. But that's going to happen. But to see the faces of the people that are graduating, the faces of the parents and the relatives that are there and how proud they are to see them have graduated, it's emotional, very emotional.
Well, thank you. I commend you for your service. I thank you for your service. And I look forward for the opportunity to vote.
Councilwoman Conwell.
Through the chair, to Mr. Sanchez, the community-based correctional facility, in doing the project, you've kind of have an opinion of how important it is for the neighborhood and the community. So I'm just wondering, in your opinion, what is your knowledge in terms of community reentry? How important is that for the citizens that are returning into the community?
Well, it's becoming absolutely pivotal. As I talked about transitional services, that's one thing that we really want to focus on in the coming term that I have, because that is so important. We keep expecting them to have a different result when we turn them into the community, which got them in a lot of trouble. And we just have to change that paradigm. That's not working. So it's extremely important to answer your question more directly.
Okay. And from the, I don't know if you had any dealings with the inmates themselves or the people that are re-entering into society. Do you feel, in your opinion, that they are better under a community reentry kind of program, or if it was connected with public safety or justice affairs, they would have a problem with that?
I think it'd be a great idea. It's important to keep this dialogue going on what's it take to stay clean of drugs, to stay out of another felony. And we've done a recidivism report after we've been in operation for 3 years. And we've concluded that 84% of those that finish the program do not get reincarcerated in the impending 2 years that follow. We think that's very good. And one of the other passions that we have is we want to increase that.
Well, I thank you for that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns? Well, I want to thank you all, Ms. Harper, Ms. Bryan, and Mr. Sanchez, for your willingness to serve on this committee. I think the combination that you three bring just independently and collectively is going to be an exciting move for the board. And so without further ado, I would like to make a motion. Mr. Kraus, is this second? Does this need second reading suspension?
I do not believe so. I haven't heard anything that there are pending meetings.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Sanchez, you would know, do we have any meetings coming up for the board in the near future?
Our board?
Yes.
We meet monthly.
Okay.
And we have subcommittee meetings in between that. As a matter of fact, I came from one just this morning at 9 o'clock about this transitional service that we're trying to put in place. So we meet every month, yes.
Okay, so with that in mind, just to ensure that our candidates are not missing any potential meetings, I'm going to respectfully request that we move this to the full body of the council under second reading suspension. Are there any objections to that? Do I have a second? Okay, all right. Any questions, comments, or concerns? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you so much again. Appreciate the knowledge and willingness to serve that you all bring, and this will move to the full body of the council.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We will now move on to our discussion. Ms. Woods, are you in the building? All right.
Good morning, Madam Chair to the committee. So I'm here to review the dependent eligibility audit results. The dependent eligibility audit started with our open enrollment in 2016 and concluded in April of 2017. So going to briefly cover some of our the employer challenges in managing eligibility, talking about why we did this audit, the purpose of the audit, and then just ending with the results of that dependent audit. So just to speak in general on employer challenges to managing eligibility. So things that general employers see when they're trying to manage eligibility requirements is just that employees don't always inform the employer of changes in eligibility, such as a divorce, a marriage, birth, adoptions, and guardianship. And if they do, it's often not timely in order to get changes done to the plan. Another issue that employers see in challenges is just paper processes, lack of automations, which leaves room for errors and omissions. If there's not automation and things are done manually and you're working across locations that are spread out in large areas, it's hard to get information timely. It's hard to process those. It's hard to set up notifications. And then in addition, just carrying on that system concern is antiquated systems don't allow for easy monitoring. So again, setting up notifications when changes need to be made, such as dependents aging out of plan. So those are just a few that lead employers to do audits such as the one we did. So why did we do this? Our goal was to provide a clean slate moving forward and make sure those covered under our plans were truly eligible. We had our phase 1 benefits audit, and as a result of that audit, we saw a lot of areas of opportunities, and this was an immediate need in order to make sure those that were covered or under our plan should be. What are we doing moving forward to maintain this? We've implemented a number of different features, a protocol for the future. We will do an audit like this about every 3 to 5 years. We are auditing information in real time moving forward. We've worked with our benefits consultant. They have a system in place that actually performs auditing in between the information that the county has and the information that the carriers receive. So it's an additional system that can help flag if there's any issues. And then the bigger one is a better education for our employees moving forward, making sure that our policies and procedures are clear on what's required, making sure employees understand what their obligations are, because if they don't know and they're not aware, then there's a huge gap there. So employee education is huge. So I want to speak to the results of that audit. So what did we find? First and foremost, we wanted to make sure if there were any findings of fraud, was anybody covered under our plan fraudulently? And I'm happy to report that there were no findings of fraud. There was no any evidence that any false documentation had been submitted to cover any dependents under our plan. So that was first and foremost, we wanted to make sure everybody under our plan was legitimately covered. This chart that you see here provides a general overview of the dependents that left the plan. And I want to point out that we did this process as a part of open enrollment. And if you recall, we engaged in an active open enrollment for 2016, which required everybody to meet with a benefit educator and sit and talk about the plans and actively look at what plans they were enrolled in. One of the things that happens when you do an open enrollment is you tend to see more changes come because people are actually looking into the plan and their enrollments and making better choices. So because we did both of these together, you're going to see a lot of numbers in here that could have resulted in the fact that people were changing plans, maybe changing to a spouse's plan or making some changes. So these numbers alone are just a result of the entire process, not necessarily just the dependent audit alone. So as far as reason for separation from our plan, moving from 16 and 17, we had 20 dependents that left the plan due to an age out. So dependents reached the age of 26 and were no longer eligible to receive that health care. And as a result of the process that we went through, we found that there were 20 dependents that had remained on the plan that were removed in 2017. We had 10 dependents that had actually passed away during the 2016 plan year that we were not made aware of to remove them from the plan. So there were 10 dependents that had passed that got removed from the plan in 2017. Now, to speak to that one specifically, the question of, well, what do we do with those? How does that impact? Are we recouping expenses? Looking at those 10 dependents, so we have two plans at the county. We have the employee-only plan and we have the family plan. The dependents that were covered, them coming off the plan, the employees were still enrolled in a family plan, so we were not paying more premiums, even though they were covered under the plan, because there were more dependents covered under those plans. So that one specifically, of course, there weren't any claims being paid out once the dependent passed away, and we found that we were not actually paying extra premiums because they were covered under a family plan, regardless of their enrollment. We had 24 situations where there was a divorce. Employee was divorced from a spouse during the 2016 plan year, and upon the active open enrollment and the dependent audit, they were removed from the plan. And then the remaining ones you see here, we had 177 that submitted insufficient documentation during the audit. The employee submitted documentation, either had the wrong information, the wrong forms, and therefore their dependents were dropped from coverage. That area right there, we saw a lot of appeals that came through, and a number of them went through a different process there, but there was overall some insufficient documentation. One of the biggest struggles employees had was for a spouse. They had to submit both a marriage certificate and a proof of relationship document. So a marriage certificate is really only as good as the day it's issued. It doesn't show if there's a divorce. So if an employee gets, or an individual gets divorced, they still carry their marriage certificate. The only way we can validate that that marriage certificate is actually active is to get that proof of relationship, such as a tax document, a utility bill, something else showing that they're still cohabitating and still together. That was an area where we saw a lot of wrong documentation coming in, or they supplied partial documentation and not the other piece that was needed. The other three fall into a category just kind of general. We had 206 employees that just did not respond to the audit, and that could be for various reasons. They were switching plans, taking a spouse's plan, so they had no need to verify eligibility because they were no longer taking the plan. It could be various reasons. Same thing, 55 that actually specified they were electing other coverage. So again, possibly taking a spouse's plan or another plan that was available outside of the county. And then 63 that just indicated that they were voluntarily terming their benefits. Again, it's kind of a catch-all, so it could be for various reasons, whether they're taking other insurance or whatever the reason is. So those were the 7 categories that were identified in the reason for separation through the dependent audit and the open enrollment process. So we had a total of 555 dependents that came off of the plan coming from 16 to 17.
Yes.
Through the chair to Ms. Woods, in terms of the 20 or the individuals that age out, and we kind of know that every year because we can look and see when the dependents' ages are those calculated in some kind of way as savings that we know when we're doing the glance ahead?
So is your question when you say savings, when we're forecasting or?
Yeah, when you're forecasting, you know that so many employees' children are going to be 26 because you have their birthdays. Is that in the computer some kind of way? So if we know that you might have maybe one every month, or you might have all 5 in January. Are we keeping track of that and knowing that that's going to produce some savings, I guess, when we're forecasting?
Sure. So the difficult thing with this is it's not necessarily going to represent a savings because we have new employees coming off and on the plan continuously as we hire new employees or there's life events. So that's one of the tricky things with this is that, you know, even with these people I'm going to go into next, is it's not necessarily you can look and say, here's what we saved. You're talking claims avoidance, and monthly the plan shifts constantly with enrollments. So, you know, there are some projections and we look at the population and are they likely to leave or come off in retirements, but it's not as simple as saying, we know this many people are leaving, so we're going to save, bottom line, this amount of money, if that makes sense.
Okay, but I understand that, but to follow up, so in some terms, you know that the employees, that you had 206 that did not respond to, I guess, wanting healthcare coverage or a certain number. So are we able to do things like that? Because we have open enrollment every year to kind of project, since we know we didn't have that many employees.
Correct. So we do. So right now we're actually going through this process for next year. We can take a look at the population and get an idea of how many people we think are going to be covered under certain plans, how many dependents, and then we can match that up against actual enrollment. So there are projections. We do look at who we know might be coming off the plan, and that's really what we use in order to start preparing for budget and where we might be with that budget every year.
A follow-up on that. In the past, we've been able, to those that did not seek benefits from us, they may have gotten it from their spouse. Do we still have the benefit to give them a payment? Is that still occurring?
So we do have what's called a benefit allowance, and of course it depends what unit the employee is in, what bargaining unit, because they all have some differences in the amounts and how they're issued. But in the end, the way, for the most part, the way that benefit allowance is issued is if an employee takes all of the benefit package, so the major medical and the supplemental benefits, that benefit allowance isn't issued, but if they don't take the benefit packages, then they do receive it. Same thing if they take if they don't take major medical and they take dental and vision, then they get a part of that allowance. So for the majority of employees, if they're not taking benefits or if they're taking different levels, they may receive some of that benefit allowance.
I have a couple questions on the previous slide, if you could go back to that. When people submitted insufficient documentation, how did we then respond? I presume that we contacted them and made some effort to get it corrected. What had to happen before we would take them off of coverage?
Sure. So we actually, when we first started the open enrollment independent audit process, of course, we had a deadline. We ended up extending the deadline 5 times through April because we understood this was a huge undertaking. And it's a lot, some employees don't necessarily have these forms readily accessible, or if they don't have, birth certificates. We knew it was going to take some time in order to get this process there. So first and foremost, we extended the deadline 5 times total from the original deadline. If an employee submitted documents and they were not complete, everything was processed through a company that we utilized. And as soon as they submitted those documents, they would get a notice, either electronically by the email address that they left, or through a home mailer if they included their mailing address, that would give them specifically, you submitted these documents, here's what we don't have, here's what's wrong, here's what you need to do. And then there were multiple reminders throughout the time period, again, so either by email, by US mail, and then prior to taking any action or moving off the plan, we involved the management teams and we involved the unions for union employees, saying here's the list of employees that have either not taken action or need to take action, to get them involved in trying to help them meet those deadlines as well.
And along the same lines, We had 206 that didn't respond. What did we do to try to get them to respond? I presume you didn't just send one notice and that was it. I presume there were follow-up efforts made. Is that correct?
Correct. So similarly, throughout the entire timeline, there would be similar email reminders or home mailers reminding them to do that. For those that chose not to respond, they either didn't respond because they were taking people off the plan and they didn't feel they needed to supply the documents, or they were changing plans and therefore didn't need to supply them. But there were multiple mailers and emails to them as well, including just mass email announcements countywide.
Okay, thank you.
You started off by saying there was no fraud found, but out of those 206, there could have been fraud, right?
When I say there's no fraud found, in that the documents that were supplied to the agency that we worked with, there was no evidence of fraudulent documents. So fraud in the sense of, could there have been? There could have been, but we didn't have any evidence to show it.
And what's your policy if you do find it? You tend to turn it over to the prosecutor?
There would be, and I'm not sure if it goes directly to the prosecutor. I think it would probably depend on what type of fraud it would be. I know the county's policy, if there's any falsification of records or information it can be a result of immediate termination. And I'm sure if somebody's actually falsifying identity, then there would be a requirement to take it even further.
And you mentioned if you elected other coverage, there would be, is that compensation as far as paying a stipend towards another policy? Is that ever cash?
Let me make sure I understand the question right. So if I work for the county and
If I opt out, go to another insurance company, myself,
you receive the allowance added to your pay. So if you do not take, if you're an employee and you do not take county benefits, then that is an allowance that you receive in your pay.
so it's like cash payment.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, it is taxed. It does go into the paycheck, but yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. What was the percentage of enrollments versus the open enrollments, like the difference?
Say that one more time.
The percentage of enrollments versus the open enrollment. So it looks like they're drop off of 555, but I'm sure we got some more in. So what was that
We
number?
did. I don't have those numbers available, but I can let you know where we ended up with the enrollments once an open enrollment took place.
Can you compare it to last year for us?
I don't know offhand, but I can email that to you guys. I do have the numbers from what the enrollments of the plan were compared to where they moved after open enrollment.
That would be helpful. And then what was the cost of the audit? Just curious.
To actually perform the audit alone, we did not have to pay for the audit. This was a service that was built in through Oswald. And so there was no cost to the county. It wasn't a line item. There was no fee for service. It was provided through our open enrollment process.
Okay, if you'll proceed.
Sure.
Thank you.
So again, I want to point out that the number shifts are not only a result of the dependent audit, but also that active open enrollment process alone, as I mentioned before. Agencies, organizations typically see a shift in enrollment when they do an open enrollment process because you're getting them more involved in looking at their coverage. There were 324 individuals that ended up electing coverage outside the county, didn't respond, or voluntarily termed benefits. And as Councilman Gallagher indicated, we don't know what's behind those numbers or why those decisions were made. This is just what they indicated when they went into that portal, or if they just didn't respond. Now, going into what this means for the county, as I mentioned before, so we have 555 people coming off the plan, but we also have people coming on the plan. So what does that look like? Can we say there's a savings? This type of thing is not something that you're going to look at the budget at the end of this year and say, look, there's the 2.9 million that we save from the dependent audit, because it depends how that plan is used. We can say that there's a projected average savings in the future of $2.9 million because we had a lot of people come off the plan. but it also depends on how our current employees are utilizing the plan. So 555 people coming off, we're paying for less bodies. But if you have claim spikes or differences, those can kind of eat away at that projected savings. So I want to put that out there. It's not something that you can look line item and say, there's the 2.9 million. It's really a claims avoidance dollar amount. We should see a savings, but it does depend on how many people are coming on and off the plans and the services that they're utilizing. But we can project that it'll be around 2.9 million. This number, again, is an average based on our overall dependent population cost. So when they look at the amount of people that are coming off the plan, the actuaries do a projection based on our dependents and how they were using a plan to get us that number.
Through the chair to Holly, the 2.9 million is for the 3-year or just 2017?
Just through 2017.
Okay.
So with that, just closing out, as we continue to introduce new benefit programs and make changes, we know first and foremost, change is difficult. So I'll leave you with a quote: change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. We do have a plan of where we're going. We want to make sure that we have good benefit programs. There's a lot that goes into cleaning them up and making sure they're the right plans. But in the end, we know that the things that we're doing will lead us to a better place in benefits, and making sure that we're offering the right plans and that they're the most cost effective because we're putting things in place like these audits.
Mr. Miller?
Ms. Wood, you commented on the role that open enrollment played in this process. I'm not familiar with anything other than open enrollment. How else is it done?
So it's the idea of an active open enrollment where you're requiring everybody to go in and enroll versus a passive open enrollment where people can just remain in their coverage and default. So it's just the difference in the type of enrollment that took place. One of the reasons why organizations do an active open enrollment, it requires every employee to go in, look at their coverage, re-enroll, as opposed to just defaulting. So for example, if you were somebody that had somebody covered under your plan and it's a passive open enrollment and you had a change, you wouldn't do anything necessarily because you know you're going to be defaulted. But going into the plan, I'm going to say, oh, wait a minute. I got a divorce. I forgot to take my husband off. Or wait a minute, my daughter has coverage now through somebody else. I need to take her off that plan. So that's where an active open enrollment gets employees more engaged and looking at their benefit packages where they might notice something needs changed versus just being a passive and the defaults.
And Madam Chair, Ms. Woods, do we know when the next open enrollment is and whether it's going to be active or passive?
Yes, so we are projecting the dates. It's going to be end of October through, I think it's October 12th. I can get you those dates for sure. We are not doing a full active open enrollment as we did last year. They will not be required to, employees will not be required to meet with an educator. We will do a typical process where they're going into MyHR, enrolling in their benefits. They will have to make some changes because of, some employees will have to go in and make some election changes, but we will have some defaults. I would say it's not typical for organizations to do an active enrollment every year because it is very laborious.
Labor intensive,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Every how many years would you intend that at the county we would do an active open enrollment?
Best practices show that you're doing that with your dependent audit at least every 3 to 5 years.
So the next time you do a dependent audit, then you would also do the active enrollment and do them at the same time?
It's likely the plan, yes.
Okay.
Councilwoman?
Through the chair to Ms. Woods, the county gets a group pool rate, correct? So how do we, collectively, all of us, because we have so many employees, how are we really determining the savings if we have to?
The savings from the dependent audit?
Yeah.
So what they do is they look at 550 dependents coming off the plan, and they can actually take a look at the claims and the utilization of the plan from the carriers. and do a projection. So showing that, out of 555 dependents, we'll say 40% were Metro, 20% were Medical Mutual, and here's what their utilization is. And they can do a projection based on that population. So that's why it's not an exact number, but they are looking at the individual utilization to give us a potential cost, a potential cost savings, if that made sense.
Are we currently in negotiations with the medical plans to change for this open enrollment?
We are. So we are, our major medical and our prescription contracts are all up for renewal. So we went through the RFP process and we are engaging and making recommendations for the carriers to move forward with new contracts.
And I know in the past, all that takes place usually at the end of the year or something like that. So you will come back to this committee and update us, and because I know it was always October or November after you finish your last report or something.
Yes, it'll be right at the time prior to open enrollment rolling out. So we'll come to council, give a presentation, the committee a presentation on the plans, the carriers, what the rates will be in the open enrollment process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to follow up when we're talking about that no response audience, and am I to understand Oswald, you said performed the?
It was actually a company called HMS.
HMS?
It was a third-party consultant.
Okay. And you said this was a unpaid agreement? What were the terms? So can you elaborate, please?
Sure. So this was a part of our contract with Oswald. It's not something that we paid for the services of. It's just built in our package. So even looking at the contract, it's not something that we're charged for. It's just a program that's part of the package that we bought. So Oswald, actually, we engage in a contract with HMS, but it's not for any exchange of funds. It's just for the security of information. But we're actually not charged for those services that are performed.
So when you say the security of information for the benefit of HMS securing information?
Correct, because employees are submitting their documents to HMS. We have to engage in a agreement with HMS to ensure that they have the appropriate levels of security for the confidentiality of the information that they're receiving.
Okay, and so, but this is a third party through Oswald, so Oswald made the recommendation to us and.
Correct.
Okay, just trying to nail that down.
Yeah,
And
so the
then-
contract's actually between HMS and Oswald. There's an agreement that we engage with HMS, but it's purely to protect the information that the employees are submitting to HMS.
Okay, so when we're talking, I want to revisit the no response as it relates to the no fraud and HMS's follow-up. When we don't have a response, you touched on something that kind of triggered a thought in my mind, is the people that were previously, of these 206 that were originally receiving our benefits, did we look and see if there were any claims historically prior to them dropping off and then determining there was no fraud? At that, how do we, I guess my question is, how do we determine if they did not respond?
Sure.
That there was no fraud? How did we know that before they jetted, they did not commit fraud?
So the fraud that we're looking at is purely to what's provided for the dependent audit. So the documents that are submitted to HMS, of course, HMS is looking at Social Security numbers, making sure, there's a methodology for how Social Security numbers are issued based on birth dates. And of course, they would flag anything if there would be somebody that would be submitted with an invalid Social Security number or birth certificates, things like that. So when I say there was no evidence of fraud, it's that the documents that were submitted to keep employees on the plan, there was no evidence found in any of those documents submitted. Could somebody have been enrolled in the plan previously and just came off the plan and maybe they shouldn't have been? They could have. We didn't have any evidence to support it, but the purpose of the audit was purely to clean up the plan, make people supply the documents, and validate those documents to make sure there were no findings of fraud.
Okay, got it. That is also helpful. I just want to make sure that we're consistent in what it is that we are, the terms that we're using to define things, and making sure that we're all on the same page. So I think that clears up the questions that I had. You have another question, Ms. Conway?
Not a question, just a comment in terms of not only to look at fraud from an employee standpoint, but I think to put out there that we also needed to get our act together as the county, and because we had lost information that we needed to know and that we needed to be responsible for. So it's not so much of a fraudulent end from the employees. I just want to put that out there for the employees. It was also based on us as a county, making sure that we had the appropriate documents and that we could do an accurate justification.
Absolutely. We wanted to make sure everything that we had in our system was current. We cleaned up birth dates, social security numbers, names. It was a lot to clean up, so you're correct.
Okay, I think that concludes the questions that we have with regards to the audit, with the exception of the ones that we noted. If you could get that information to the clerk so she could distribute to the committee for our gratification and satisfaction, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for the presentation, and we look forward to the next one. Council Clerk or Committee, any miscellaneous business? None. Council Clerk, any other public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.